My stepdaughter stood beside my dying husband's hospital bed holding a stack of papers and a notary stamp. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong, then leaned down to whisper, "The old witch gets nothing." My heart broke right there. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move. She made him sign everything over to her while he was too weak to lift his hand. But what she didn't know was that a small camera in that hospital room caught everything she did. 3 days after his funeral, detectives knocked on her door. She answered with her usual smug smile, but it disappeared when they showed her the video I'd hidden. That was the day justice found her. Before I tell you how it all happened, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. This story will remind you why truth always comes out, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. My name is Grace Harlow, and for 15 years, I was married to a man named Thomas, the kindest soul I ever met. He wasn't rich or fancy. He built homes for people, small-town families who trusted him because his word meant something. When I met him, I was a nurse working long night shifts, worn out and lonely. He brought laughter back into my life. We built a quiet, simple world together. Our mornings were slow, coffee on the porch, the sound of birds, his favorite newspaper folded just right on the table. He'd tease me for humming while I cooked, and I'd laugh at how seriously he took crossword puzzles. Life was steady, peaceful, and full of love. But there was one thing that always lingered, like a shadow over our happiness. His daughter, Lydia. From the first day I met her, she made it clear I was not welcome. She smiled for her father's sake, but her eyes always told the truth. She thought I was after his money. She thought she could outlast me, waiting for the day she'd get everything she believed she deserved. In the early years, I tried to be kind. I called her on birthdays, invited her over for dinners, sent her little gifts at Christmas. She'd thank me with cold politeness, then vanish again. Thomas would sigh and say, "Give her time, Grace. She'll come around." I wanted to believe that, but I knew better. Some hearts don't soften with time. They harden. Everything changed when Thomas got sick. It started with chest pain, then turned into hospital visits, and eventually, a long-term stay. I left my nursing job to care for him. Every day, I washed his hands, fed him, and read to him until he fell asleep. Those months were exhausting, but I didn't mind. I loved him too much to let anyone else care for him. Lydia, on the other hand, came only when she wanted to ask questions about his will. She never asked how he was feeling. She'd sit beside his bed with her perfect hair, her polished nails tapping on her phone, and ask things like, "Dad, you still have me listed as your primary heir, right?" One afternoon, I overheard her whisper, to him, "You don't want people thinking your nurse wife is taking everything, do you?" I wanted to scream at her for saying that to a dying man, but Thomas just looked at her with those tired eyes and said, "Lydia, you have everything you need. Grace takes care of me." That only made her angrier. From then on, she stopped hiding her resentment. I caught her going through his drawers one evening while he slept. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "Looking for medical bills." Don't get paranoid, but I knew that wasn't the truth. She was looking for documents, his will, insurance forms, anything she could twist. Despite all that, Thomas never stopped loving her. He told me once, "She's my little girl, Grace. I can't give up on her." And I understood. That's what love does. It forgives even when it shouldn't. When his condition worsened, Lydia stopped by less often, only sending short messages to check if he was still stable. But one night, everything changed. Thomas's doctor called and told me he didn't have long left. I stayed by his side, holding his hand, whispering how much I loved him. And that's when she walked in, dressed in black like she was already at a funeral. She wasn't alone this time. A man followed her, a notary, carrying a folder full of papers and a clipboard. She smiled sweetly and said, "Dad, I just need you to sign something important. It's for your estate. We can't leave things unfinished." I felt my chest tighten. "What are you doing, Lydia?" I asked. She turned her head, her smile fading into that cold, familiar look, making sure things go to family, where they belong. I stood there helpless as she placed a pen in his trembling hand, pretending it was just routine paperwork. He looked at me weakly, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. He trusted her because she was his daughter. He didn't realize what she was stealing from him and from me. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to scream. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. If I acted out of anger, I'd lose everything. So I waited. I held my breath, let her play her cruel game, and made a silent promise to Thomas. "You won't get away with this," I whispered to myself. And that's when I decided I would find proof. The night Lydia brought those papers to the hospital became the longest night of my life. I remember the cold smell of antiseptic in the air, the faint hum of machines, and the sound of Thomas struggling to breathe. He was too weak to argue, his hand trembling as Lydia pressed a pen between his fingers. Her voice was honeyed and smooth, but her eyes were sharp, watching him like a predator watching its prey. "Dad, you just need to sign these," she said sweetly, pretending to wipe his forehead with a tissue. "It's just some paperwork to make sure your estate doesn't get tangled up later. Grace won't have to worry about a thing." I stood by his bedside, my hands gripping the rail so tightly my knuckles turned white. Something deep inside me knew she was lying, but I couldn't prove it yet. I tried to intervene. "Lydia, this isn't the time. He needs rest, not signatures." She turned toward me, her expression changing instantly from gentle to venomous. "Grace, please. You're not his lawyer. You're just confusing him." Then she smiled again and leaned closer to Thomas. "You trust me, don't you, Dad? I just want to help." Thomas, weak and half-conscious, nodded slightly. He trusted her. He had always trusted her, even when she didn't deserve it. His signature came out as a shaky line on the paper. The notary, a tired-looking man who clearly didn't understand what was happening, quickly stamped the document. Lydia thanked him with fake sweetness and turned to me with a look that said she had just won. When the notary left, she bent over and whispered something in my ear, her voice low and sharp. "The old witch gets nothing. You should start packing now." For a moment, I couldn't move. The rage that burned in my chest was almost unbearable, but I knew if I lost control, she'd twist everything. She'd call security or claim I was unstable. I had to stay calm. I had to think. That night, after she left, I sat beside Thomas's bed, holding his hand. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale. I whispered, "Don't worry, love. I know what she did. I'll make it right." He tried to squeeze my hand, but he was too weak. I kissed his forehead and made a promise to him and to myself. I would find proof of her cruelty, no matter what it took. The next morning, I went home briefly to shower and change clothes. On the way, I stopped at a small electronics store and bought a tiny motion-activated camera. It looked like a small vase of artificial flowers, the kind people use to brighten up hospital rooms. I knew it was risky, but it was the only way to expose her. When I returned to the hospital, I placed it quietly on the shelf beside his bed, where it could see everything. Over the next few days, Lydia's visits became more frequent. She acted sweet and devoted when nurses were around, holding his hand, pretending to be the caring daughter. But when we were alone, her mask dropped. She'd lean close to him, her tone low and impatient. "Dad, you need to stop letting Grace make your decisions," she hissed one afternoon. "She's using you. You can't even see it." He shook his head weakly. "That's not true, Lydia. Grace has been here every day. You haven't." Her eyes narrowed. "You're confused. You always get confused after your meds." I stood quietly in the corner, pretending to look at my phone. I wanted to scream, to protect him, but I kept still. The camera was recording. It would catch every word. Later that night, when she left, I sat by Thomas's bed and cried softly. "You didn't deserve this," I whispered. "You gave her everything, and she's taking even more." He opened his eyes just enough to whisper back, "I love you, Grace." Those were the last words he ever said to me. 3 days later, he was gone. At the funeral, Lydia played the grieving daughter perfectly. She wore black, dabbed her eyes with a tissue, and accepted everyone's sympathy. People praised her for her strength while I stood alone, too drained to correct them. She even gave a eulogy, talking about how much she admired her father's generosity. I had to bite my lip to keep from calling her out in front of everyone, but after the service, her mask slipped again. She cornered me outside the church, her tone sharp. You can stay in the house for a few weeks, she said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. After that, I'll be moving in. You know, since it's mine now. I looked her straight in the eye and said quietly, "Enjoy it while you can, Lydia. It won't last long." She gave a short laugh. "You sound so sure of yourself. What are you going to do, call a lawyer? You can't fight me." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I had something better than lawyers. I had the truth. That night, when I got home, I opened my laptop and watched the footage from the hospital camera. My hands trembled as the screen came to life. There she was, standing beside his bed, manipulating his hand, whispering to the notary that he was of sound mind. Then she smirked at me through the camera, as if daring me to stop her. By the time the video ended, tears of anger and relief streamed down my face. I whispered, "I've got you now." I copied the file onto a flash drive and drove straight to the police station. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't feel tired either. I felt alive for the first time since Thomas had taken his last breath. Lydia thought she had stolen everything from me, but she didn't know that she had walked straight into her own trap. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lydia's face in that hospital room, her smirk, her hand guiding Thomas's weak fingers across the paper, the cruel satisfaction in her. I kept replaying it in my mind, and each time, my anger burned hotter. But under that anger was something stronger, determination. She thought I was helpless, a grieving widow too broken to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The next morning, I dressed neatly, combed my hair, and slipped the flash drive with the video into my purse. I didn't want to look like a victim when I walked into the police station. I wanted to look like a woman who was ready to prove the truth. As I drove, I rehearsed what I'd say, my hands tight on the steering wheel. My heart raced, not out of fear, but from the certainty that this was the moment everything would change. When I entered the police station, the air felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath with me. The receptionist looked up kindly and asked if I needed help. I said, "Yes, I need to report something serious. Fraud and elder abuse." Her eyes widened slightly, and within minutes, I was sitting across from Detective Ruiz, a calm, steady man with kind eyes that made it a little easier to speak. I explained everything, from Lydia showing up with the notary to the whisper she thought no one heard, to how I set up the hidden camera. Ruiz listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally and jotting down notes. When I handed him the flash drive, my hands trembled slightly. "This is the proof," I said. "It shows everything she did. She made him sign those papers when he was barely conscious. She took advantage of him." He looked at me for a long moment and then said softly, "Mrs. Harlow, I've seen a lot of things in my career, but not many people have the courage to do what you did. Let's see what's on here." He called in a technician to play the footage on a larger screen. As soon as the video began, the room grew silent. We watched Lydia's every move, the way she placed the pen in Thomas's weak hand, how she whispered instructions, and the moment she smirked and muttered, "The old witch gets nothing." My chest tightened hearing those words again, but this time, I wasn't powerless. Now they were evidence. When the video ended, Detective Ruiz leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "That's coercion," he said firmly, "and possibly forgery, depending on what her lawyer filed. Your husband was clearly not of sound mind. She'll be facing serious charges for this." Hearing those words sent a wave of relief through me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just felt an overwhelming sense of justice starting to take shape. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. He folded his hands. "We'll need to verify the documents she filed and confirm with the notary that this signing took place. Once that's done, we'll get a warrant. You'll need to stay available in case we need a statement." I nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." For the next few days, everything moved quickly. The detectives contacted the notary, who admitted he didn't realize Thomas was that unwell. He said Lydia had assured him her father was lucid and just having a rough day. The notary's guilt was clear in his voice, and his statement only strengthened the case. Meanwhile, Lydia wasted no time trying to enjoy what she thought she'd won. She moved into my house before I could even finish mourning. I watched from my car as she carried her designer bags through the front door, laughing on the phone. My home, the one I had shared with Thomas, had turned into a symbol of her greed. But I didn't go inside. I didn't argue. I waited for the law to do what it needed to do. 2 days later, Detective Ruiz called me. His tone was calm but firm. "Mrs. Harlow, we have everything we need. We're going to visit Ms. Harlow today to question her about the will and present the evidence. You don't have to come, but I thought you'd want to know." I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence for a long moment. Then I decided to go anyway, not to interfere but to see with my own eyes the moment the truth caught up to her. When I arrived, her car was parked out front. I stayed across the street, far enough that she wouldn't see me. Moments later, 2 unmarked police cars pulled up. Lydia came to the door wearing a silk robe, clearly annoyed by the interruption. I could just imagine her arrogant tone as she greeted them. "Officers, what's this about?" Then I saw Detective Ruiz hold up a folder, the printed still frame from the video showing her holding the pen over Thomas's hand. Her face froze. Even from across the street, I could see her confusion turn into panic. She tried to speak, but Ruiz stepped closer, his tone calm but firm. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught a few: forgery, coercion, evidence. Her hands flew to her mouth. The arrogance was gone. For the first time, she looked small, frightened, human. My heart didn't fill with joy or triumph. It filled with something quieter: closure. The kind of peace that comes when you finally know the truth is no longer buried under lies. When they led her to the car, I turned away. I didn't need to see any more. I whispered softly to myself, "You're free now, Thomas. It's over." Driving home, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. I knew it wasn't just justice for me. It was justice for him, for the man who had trusted too easily, loved too deeply, and deserved far better than the betrayal he suffered. Lydia had stolen his peace in his final days, but now his truth was what ended her game. That night, for the first time since his passing, I slept soundly. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like Thomas was finally at rest, and so was I. 3 days after Thomas's funeral, Lydia sat in what she believed was her new home, the house Thomas and I had built together. She had already replaced the curtains, changed the pictures on the walls, and filled the rooms with her expensive perfume. It made me sick to think of her sitting there, pretending she belonged. She had no idea her life was about to unravel completely. That morning, I sat quietly in my car parked down the street. The house looked smaller from a distance, but to me, it still carried the weight of every memory Thomas and I shared. Every laugh, every tear, every late-night talk about how lucky we were to have found each other. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for justice. Inside, Lydia was hosting her friends, showing off the house like it was a prize she'd won. Through the open window, I could hear her bragging, her voice light and arrogant. "Daddy always said I'd end up with everything. He just needed a little push to make it official." Her friends laughed, unaware that her little push was about to destroy her. Then came the knock on the door. 2 firm knocks, steady, official, unmistakable. Lydia paused mid-laugh, frowning. She wasn't expecting anyone. She walked to the door, still smiling, and pulled it open to find 2 detectives standing on the porch, badges in hand. "Ms. Lydia Harlow?" one of them asked. "Yes," she said, her confidence faltering slightly. "Can I help you?" "I'm Detective Ruiz. We need to talk to you about the documents you filed concerning your father's estate." Lydia's friends exchanged confused looks, but she quickly forced a laugh. "Oh, sure. Is there some problem?" "Everything was handled legally." Ruiz nodded slightly. "That's what we're here to verify. May we come in?" She hesitated, her smile twitching, then stepped aside. "Of course. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." They entered the living room, where the sound of expensive heels clicking against the wooden floor was suddenly replaced by heavy silence. Lydia motioned for them to sit, but Detective Ruiz remained standing. He opened a folder and placed a few printed photos on the table. The first one made her freeze. It was a still image from the video I had recorded. Lydia's hand holding the pen, Thomas's frail hand trembling underneath hers. Her voice caught. "Where did you get that?" Ruiz looked her in the eye. "From the hidden camera in your father's hospital room. Mrs. Grace Harlow provided it to us. The footage shows you manipulating your father's hand to sign documents he was not mentally capable of understanding." Her face turned pale. That's not true. He knew what he was signing. He wanted me to have everything." Ruiz didn't raise his voice. He simply slid another photo across the table, a close-up of her whispering to the notary, her mouth forming the words, "He's too out of it to remember anything." Lydia's friends began whispering among themselves. One of them stood up quietly and moved toward the door, not wanting to be part of what was happening. Lydia looked around the room, her confidence shattering piece by piece. "This isn't real," she stammered. "She's setting me up. That woman, she's always hated me." Ruiz shook his head. "The video has audio, Ms. Harlow. It's very real. You told your father's nurse to leave the room. You gave instructions to the notary. You made sure the paperwork favored you entirely. That's not misunderstanding. That's coercion. And it's a felony." She took a step back, her breathing uneven. "I didn't mean any harm. He was confused. I was trying to help him. He didn't know how to handle his affairs." "You mean the affairs you wanted control over?" Ruiz interrupted. "The money? The property? The accounts?" She went silent. Her hands shook as she clutched her robe. Ruiz nodded to his partner, who read her the formal charges: fraud, elder abuse, and coercion. Lydia's face crumpled as she realized the weight of her actions was finally catching up to her. She looked around the house one last time, her voice trembling. "This was supposed to be mine," she whispered. Ruiz replied softly, "It never was." As they led her outside, her friends pretended not to see. Some watched from a distance. Others left in their cars. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the sound of the police car door closing. I sat still in my car across the street, watching her step out in handcuffs, her head bowed, her face pale and streaked with tears. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just felt peace. Deep, steady peace. She had taken everything from me once, but now the truth had taken it all back. When the car drove away, I got out of my vehicle and walked slowly toward the house. Detective Ruiz met me halfway. His expression was respectful, almost gentle. "It's over, Mrs. Harlow. The video was enough. The notary confirmed everything. You did the right thing." "Thank you," I said softly. "Not for me, for Thomas. He deserved better than what she did." He nodded. "You gave him that, in the end. You gave him justice." When I stepped inside, the air felt different, lighter, calmer. I walked through each room, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs she hadn't thrown away yet. Everything still smelled faintly of her perfume, but beneath it was something familiar, something pure. The scent of the home Thomas and I had made. I sat down in the living room, the same place where she had gloated, and whispered quietly, "It's done, love. She can't hurt us anymore." The afternoon sun poured through the windows, filling the house with golden light. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Later that night, I lit a candle beside Thomas's photo. I told him everything: the visit, the arrest, the way Lydia's mask finally cracked. I imagined his gentle voice saying, "You always did know how to stand your ground, Grace." Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of relief. I had kept my promise, and as I watched the candlelight flicker across his picture, I realized something important. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but it comes. Sometimes you just have to be brave enough to wait and strong enough to fight for it. That night, I whispered one last time, "Rest easy now, my love." The truth won. The morning after Lydia's arrest, the world felt different. The air outside was calm and clean, the kind that follows a heavy storm. I woke up early, long before sunrise, and for a moment, I forgot everything that had happened. Then it came back. The memory of the police cars, the quiet look on Detective Ruiz's face, and Lydia's pale expression as she realized her lies had finally caught up with her. It wasn't joy that filled me. It was peace, the kind of peace that comes when truth replaces fear. I made myself a cup of coffee and stood by the kitchen window. The sun began to rise over the garden Thomas and I had planted together years ago. The flowers were starting to bloom again, the colors soft and gentle, just the way he liked them. It felt like a message from him, like the world was finally breathing again. I whispered softly, "We did it, love. We made things right." Over the next few weeks, everything began to settle. The court voided the fraudulent will, confirming that the document Lydia had forced Thomas to sign was invalid. All assets were returned, according to his original wishes, half to me and half to the community charity he had supported for years. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about respect, about protecting his memory and the life we built together. I didn't attend Lydia's hearing, though the lawyer invited me. I didn't want to see her again, not because I hated her, but because I didn't need to. She had already done enough damage to herself. From what I heard, she cried in court, insisting she hadn't meant harm. But tears don't erase cruelty, and excuses don't undo what's been done. A few days later, Detective Ruiz called to let me know the case was officially closed. His voice was calm, professional, but there was warmth in it too. "Mrs. Harlow," he said, "you should be proud. Most people wouldn't have had the courage to do what you did. You protected your husband's name. That takes strength." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in the living room, the same place where Lydia once stood, bragging about owning my home, and I looked around. The walls were still the same, but the energy felt new. It wasn't a house filled with grief anymore. It was filled with light again, with memories that no longer hurt. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started volunteering at the local hospital where I used to work. Helping patients reminded me of who I was before all the chaos. A woman who cared, who healed, who believed in goodness. I met new friends there, people who didn't see me as the widow or the woman in that inheritance case, but as Grace, someone who had survived something hard and come out stronger. Sometimes at night, I still thought of Lydia, not with anger, but with a strange kind of sadness. She had every chance to do better, to be a decent daughter, but greed blinded her. I hoped that someday, after her punishment, she'd understand the damage she caused and find a way to change. Thomas would have wanted that. He never stopped loving her, even when she didn't deserve it. That's the kind of heart he had. One evening, I went to the cemetery to visit his grave. I brought fresh flowers and the small silver locket he gave me on our 10th anniversary. The air was cool, and the sunset painted the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. I knelt beside the stone and said, "It's all taken care of now. She can't hurt you anymore. You're free." A breeze swept through the trees, and for a moment, I felt like he was there with me, just as gentle and steady as ever. I smiled through my tears. "You'd be proud of me, you know," I whispered. I didn't give up. On my way home, I stopped by the riverside, the same place Thomas used to fish on Sunday mornings. I sat on the bench where we once shared coffee and let the water's quiet movement calm me. Life didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of lessons, of memories, of quiet strength I didn't know I had. I learned something important through all of this. Evil doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles. But goodness, even when it's quiet, always wins if you stand your ground. I realized that forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the anger they tried to plant in your heart. Lydia had stolen Thomas's last days of peace, but she couldn't take away his truth. And that truth set everything right again. Months later, I decided to frame one of my favorite photos of Thomas and me. It's from a summer picnic years ago. He's laughing, holding a sandwich, sunlight catching his hair. Every time I look at it, I feel gratitude instead of pain. That's how I know I've healed. Now, when I sit on the porch each evening, I talk to him in my thoughts. I tell him about my day, about the people I help, about the garden that keeps growing no matter how many storms pass through. I know he'd smile and say, "You always were the strong one, Grace." This story isn't about revenge or anger. It's about love, truth, and standing up for what's right, even when it feels impossible. It's about believing that good people can still win, even in a world where greed tries to take everything away. If my story touched your heart or reminded you that truth and kindness always find their way back to the light, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. Every story here is a reminder that courage isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to do what's right, even when no one else will.